Welcome to Sacred Rite, the podcast where we explore holistic living, the wisdom of ancestral traditions, and the path to deepening our connection with ourselves, one another, and the earth. Together, we will embrace wellness in all its forms and rediscover the sacred callings that guide us home. I'm your host, Amber Young, and today's episode is a timely and powerful one for parents, caregivers, and anyone seeking a new way forward in raising children. We are in the midst of a cultural shift, one where more and more families are questioning the systems we've inherited, especially when it comes to education. With growing concerns around the limitation of public schooling and standardized approaches, parents are turning towards holistic, child-centered philosophies that honor the whole being of the child. My guest today is Teresa Angeles, mother of 6, educator, and author of the newly released book, The Montessori Home and Beyond. This insightful and practical guide empowers parents to bring Maria Montessori's timeless principles into their homes, offering a transformative approach to raising children that is rooted in connection, autonomy, and deep respect for the developing mind. In our conversation, Teresa shares the inspiration behind her book, how Montessori differs from other educational models, and why the first 6 years of life are so foundational. We explore how right brain learning and multiple intelligences intersect with Montessori's theory, and how parents can nurture their children's growth even with limited resources or space. You'll also hear thoughtful reflections from Teresa's own experience raising 6 children in a Montessori-informed home, as well as practical tools and templates from her book that can help any parent begin today without needing to do it perfectly. If you've ever felt like the traditional path doesn't quite fit your child or your vision of parenting, this episode is for you. Let's dive into this empowering and heart-centered conversation with Teresa Angeles. Teresa, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on Sacred Rite podcast. This is such a privilege and an honor to be able to have a conversation with you about something that really speaks volumes to my own work and myself and my heart. And so I'm excited today to tune in and talk to listeners and share a little bit about your work. And can you share a little bit about what inspired you to write The Montessori Home and Beyond? You just launched a book. And so I'm sure listeners will be excited to hear all about it.
Absolutely, Amber. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I'm very grateful, very excited, because as I reflect on what the Montessori principles have done for me and my family, I just feel compelled to want to share with parents. I feel that there's a new movement unfolding around the globe of parents who are becoming empowered to lead their families and to make choices that we've never completely embraced before, that I know of, where families can choose not only how to educate their children, but how to begin to create a home that will nurture their children's potentials. And we hear that term a lot, nurturing your child's potential. But I think it's a really valid concept, because our families, our homes, our relationships that nurture those children are so very important, even from the womb. I believe that children feel the home that we have. They feel the energy of our relationships with our spouses or our partners and with all those around us. They feel the relationships we have with ourselves. And I think that coming to a place where we really want to know the highest and the best so that we can give our children that from the very beginning is really, really key. So as a Montessori certified teacher for children from 2 to 12 years old, a past homeschooling mom, and now a published author, my heart is just really full to want to share what I've written. It took me 6.5 years to write it, which I never would have imagined. And just found that I started writing, and then little by little, it took on a life of its own, my book. And I had to follow the blueprint that I felt kind of erupting or unfolding from my own heart. And I had to follow that blueprint, and I had to listen. And I think I grew a lot from listening to that inner guidance of what was next. And also not only listening to myself, but talking with parents. I have 6 children of my own, all of the childbearing years. Three of them have children, which you're a good friend of my daughter's. And I spent a lot of time talking with them and working with their children. And I feel like that was a gift that helped me make my book more real. And as I spoke to them, I really tried to hear, what are parents needing right now? What's different from when I was young and I had young children? And I've kind of come to conclusions about how life is a little different now and what parents need. But basically, my goal with my book was to share the most important Montessori concepts, because even though Montessori, as one of the first female doctors of Italy, she was a physician first, and then she became passionate about working with children. Even though she wrote over 100 years ago, the many books that she wrote and published curriculum, etc., I believe that her principles are still valid today and that they still are relevant. In fact, maybe even more so, because they bring us to a point of simplicity and relationship, connection, and understanding, how to reach our children and how to create a nurturing environment.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's incredible. I love how this is all unfolded for you, and how you speak to this. It just feels so authentic and real. And I know how incredible you are just through your children, knowing being really close with your daughter, who's just one of the most incredible humans I know. And then your other daughter, Pearl, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. She's just so special. Christine's so special. All of your kids are just beyond words, special, magical humans. So if you're all listening, I love you. I love you all. I love your family. Yeah, I just, when your daughter told me that you launched your book, I was like, this is the best thing ever. I can't wait to read. And so I got it right away, and I've been going through it, and it's just really well done for parents who really need that foundation and that baseline that you're talking about. These foundational principles from Maria Montessori, because like you said, like times change, right? Culture changes and what parents need change. We have to adapt to the times, and we have to modify what we're doing over time. And that's even so true I'm a teacher as well, and I have to
Yes.
adapt and modify, and the times change. And over a decade ago was so different than it is today, even, which is wild how fast things change. But you're so right. These foundational principles are timeless. They're timeless. And there's so much connected to Maria Montessori's work, in my view, that is connected to all sorts of different child developmental theories. And I just
Yes.
see the cross connections between what I've done in my own research and what I really value as an educator and a person, and what I intuitively am like, this is the way. These Montessori principles feel very much, this is a huge part of the way that we need to be nurturing and raising our young. So thank you so much for doing that work.
May I just say one thing in there, Amber?
Of course.
I think that one of the most important principles for me, overarching, is that Montessori said that she observed children and she made notes about what she observed with children. So she wasn't like in her head just creating a plan. She was observing children, and she said the notes from her observations are her method. And so it wasn't just her thoughts, it wasn't just her own thinking, but her observations of what helped children learn. And I wanted to say one thing about her principles, and then I want to let you proceed with your plan. But she came up with many different concepts that over 100 years later were confirmed by neuroscientists. And she did the absorbent mind. She coined the term absorbent mind that is now used in many different philosophies about education. The absorbent mind is a time period of 6 years where children kind of in this magical world, and I'm sure we've all seen it. It's the innocence of the child that touches our hearts, that tugs on our hearts with love. They're innocent. They hope all things. They endure all things. They believe all things. They believe in us, and they learn effortlessly. They don't need a teacher. Like for children under 2, they learn the whole mother tongue, whichever language they're born into. They learn that whole mother tongue in the first 2 years, whether they're speaking or not. They may be speaking in a year later or so, but they learn the grammar, the syntax, the accent. They learn everything in 2 years just by absorbing the absorbent mind, where it would take adults decades to learn a language to that precision. And it's such an amazing thing. And neuroscientists who observed and did testing in the 1990s, found that we have 2 sides of the brain, the right brain and the left brain, right? And what these doctors learned is that the child basically lives in the right brain from conception until almost age 6, where their right brain, which is the creative, problem-solving brain, the artistic brain, intuitive brain that connects with their parents, all of that, they live there until about age 6, when they merge and integrate with the left brain, which is more linear, data-driven, likes lists, likes to be on time, all those things. So children in that whole first 6 years are in the right brain. And the description of the right brain and the absorbent mind that Maria Montessori talked about are almost identical. And to me, that almost validates her descriptions. And one other thing I want to say, which reflects on what you just said, Amber, is that Montessori herself studied many different child psychologists and developmental psychologists before she ever started her work. So she built her work on the scientific principles that were there at the time. So thanks for letting me say all that.
No, I'm so happy to do that because I think this is really important for listeners to hear. I think you and I, we really have a good background with the stuff that you're speaking of because of our work. And I
Yes.
think this is so important. This is some the gaps that I'm noticing. Our parents don't have that background like you and I have unless they were in it like us. So they don't
Yes.
have the background in child development and child psychology. They don't have the background in many different methodologies when it comes to education. And so with the lack of information, there is a lot of confusion and there's a lot that's
Yes.
distracting us out there. And that's making us think that this is the way that we need to be educating children, which is so wrong. Like it's
As a public school teacher, I'm so
Mhm.
excited to talk to you today. I should have said that at the beginning. I really appreciate this. Go ahead.
And even everything you were saying about, I love that she used the research, the science of her time about child
Mhm.
development. She looked into that and then she used what she observed. And then she made her own principles and foundations. And that's why I feel like I find them so valid and rooted in the truth, is because in my work and my career, I've observed so much of the same things. When you are in it, you observe this. And
Right.
I found myself getting so excited when you're just talking about the absorbent mind, because I work mostly with children who are outside of that early first 6 year stage. The children I work with, they're early pubescent children. But from my own just work with children in general of many, many, many different ages, and then the background in it. And now having my
Your
friends'
own daughter.
children, and then my own daughter, which my mind, Teresa, is so blown. I can't even tell you how blown away every single day I am about my daughter's potential and who she's becoming and how she thinks about the world and what she does. And yesterday she blew my mind because, well, My husband, we like to do like homemade pizzas. We have a little pizza oven outside. And so he was making a homemade pizza. And then I was like, oh, I need to go to the store. We need to get something. And he just got me this electric bike and I have an attachment for her. And he's like, oh, honey, the pizzas are coming out right now. By the time you get back, they'll be, cold. And I'm like, oh man, I really like want to go to the store to get this thing. And then she was excited about going to the store. So she was excited about going on our bike. And it's just this little corner store. It's called the Mercantile, where down the street from where I live. It has like some really basic grocery items for like the people who live in kind of this zone that I'm in. And anyway, she was excited about the bike. And my husband was like, oh, I could tell he was bummed. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I don't need it. I will stay here. And he's like, no, it's fine. And she was already excited. She's like, no, mama, bike. Like, let's go on the bike. I'm like, I'm sorry, honey. And then she's like, sorry, dada. I love you. And was like already excited, like, let's get the bike, mama. Like start, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna go get the bike. And she's like, yeah, sorry, dad, I love you. And I'm just like, whoa, she's so intuitive. She's so
Yeah,
emotionally and intuitive and aware.
exactly.
It just was like, whoa, she's just so with it. And everything we read and do and how she talks, her language is just absolutely mind blowing. And it's similar to one of your granddaughters because she was very much the same, very communicative. And I feel like it's so much reading the books and talking to your children and letting them discover. And when they have questions and just naming things and explaining things, I feel like a lot of parents operate in silence sometimes with their kids because they don't think that their children understand what's
Right.
going on, even from, like you said, they know what's going on in the womb or they're learning in the womb already. And then they come out and they're just extra like ready to just learn all the things. And I swear sometimes I have to just say something one time and she's just got it. Just going over like your book and hearing what you're saying, I'm just like, yeah, the absorbent mind is such a huge time and so critical. So if we can help support
Yeah,
families understand more
exactly.
about this time, then that's going to just benefit all of humanity. So I'm so excited to just pick your brain and you share more of your background with families. So
May I make a quick comment on what you just said?
yes, yes.
And I just have to say that your beautiful daughter, I believe, has a very close connection with you and with your husband because of that. And because you've been sensitive to that. And you're right. Sorry, Dada. She knew that he needed a little connection or a little compassion because he had made
Mm-hmm.
all the pizzas and
Mm-hmm.
now they might be cold before you got back. Oh, I think that's so, so beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. So, for listeners who may not be familiar, can you briefly explain what sets the Montessori approach apart from other educational philosophies?
Excellent question. Well, I believe that because Montessori founded her entire method on observation, that I think she was able, in my own mind, she was able to get to a point where she was observing children from a deeper place within her. It wasn't intellectual. It was, wow, which materials do these children like to touch? Or how did they like to spend their days? And from that, I think she developed to me a more intuitive, holistic approach. And she also talked about the different parts of the child. For the preschooler, or I should say the 0 to 6-year-old child, she designed a classroom with 5 different learning areas. And the very first one is called Practical Life. Practical Life helps to develop the fine motor and the gross motor muscles, basically, helps them to take care of themselves and their environment, and helps them to learn to have compassion for animals in the environment and plants and all of that. So they might be pouring water from one pitcher to another or spooning beans from one bowl to another. That's all practical life. It's anything practical in the environment because Montessori said that her method was a help to life. it wasn't just an intellectual learn math and learn reading, but it was whatever would help them to engage with life and master life. Because we know all of our children, their most important thing is that they want to get bigger and they want to be stronger and they want to be older. And they just come wanting to master life. They want to be independent. And, I think independent can be a term that people don't always understand, but independent doesn't mean that they're isolated or separate from parents. In fact, it can be the other way. They can be independent and very bonded. It just means that they can climb in and out of their chairs by themselves because we have children's size furniture, things like that. So anyway, back to the 5 learning areas, practical life helps them to master themselves and their worlds. So the 5 areas are practical life, sensorial, math, and language. And those are the 4 main areas for the preschooler. And as they get closer to 6, we start adding cultural area, which has to do with science, including botany about plants, zoology about animals, and any kind of science, culture, music, art. So we blend those in as the children get older and they have skills or they can color and cut and all of those things. They can work with those things. So the sensorial area is about developing the senses, having different jars that have maybe 2 jars of the same elements and maybe 5 different categories. So they might have rice in 2 jars, and they might have sand in 2 jars, and they might have marbles in 2 jars. And they would pick up at random, any 2 jars and shake them and see if they sound the same. Oh, this one sounds like rice, but this one doesn't sound like rice. This one sounds like marbles. So they would keep testing the jars until they could hear, these sounds are the same. So that refines their hearing. They may take color tablets, which are kind of like paint swabs when we go to the hardware store and are choosing paint for our home. We might get little different samples of paint. And in the Montessori environment, they might have 10 different shades of pink. And we would help our children learn which of those shades are lighter, which of those shades are darker, and they're refining their senses in that way. And that also has to do with the right brain. So the right brain, learning that in the first 6 years. So we have practical life, sensorial, math, where they're counting, and most parents do counting with beans or beads or rice or whatever. And then language, of course, speaking to our children, like you were talking about, Amber, that you do so well with your lovely daughter, speaking, reading lots of books. And I believe that because they can absorb language so early, we can show them letter cards, we can show them whole words, even as infants and toddlers. And then we can give them hands-on kind of reading programs where they can learn to build words with letters and match them to pictures, etc. So those are the 5 areas. One thing I was hoping to touch on in this podcast, and if you're okay at this point, if I could touch on some of Montessori's most important principles, maybe I'll just touch first of all on what I think are some of the parenting struggles and then go into how these principles really align with resolving those struggles. As you talked about, there's overwhelming choices out there. How do we know which advice to follow as young parents? So many books, so many podcasts, so many YouTube videos. How do we know? And that's why I go back to Montessori, because her observations were so simple. And I think it allows the parent to take a breath and be at peace. I mean, there are concepts to learn, but part of it is about observing ourselves and observing our children. What do our children need? And this is how we can choose what really resonates with us as far as where we want to go with children. She observed children and she encouraged parents to observe themselves with their children, observe their thoughts, keep a journal, whether it's a spiral notebook or anything, to keep a journal and write down what you observe about your children and yourselves, what you observe about your relationship with your partner or your spouse, what you observe about your home and your family, if you have other children, what goes on there? Her basis was observation. So, one of the other, going back to parenting struggles, not enough time. We have work, maybe our children are in school, we have responsibilities at home more and more. And those things can stress us. But if we can go back to what's really important, being present with our children is number one. And then having a way to record what we're thinking about. So when our children are sleeping or we have a few free moments, we can sit down and look at our notes, even if you don't, and it doesn't mean you have to write paragraphs. I mean, sometimes just one word will trigger what you were thinking when you were watching your child. Were they upset about being inside too long? Or were they upset because they couldn't go outside and run around? All those things are really important. And as we observe, we can tune in more. What creates discipline challenges or behavior challenges? I love that Montessori taught that if children are able to freely choose their work, and this goes for all children and even teens, and I believe even adults, if we can understand where our children are going and what they need and allow them to choose their own materials, and then backing up a step, having things available for them to choose in our home, then if they can freely choose those things and work as long as they want within reason on something without interruption, they can get to the point we call normalization. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But it helps children to get to a place of quiet and peace if they can just focus on something and do it for a long period of time. And she found that they would, learn deep concentration. And then from that, they would find kind of peacefulness in themselves and peacefulness with others because they've gotten to that point of quietude. And you know yourself, if you find a really good book or if you're really into painting and you paint and suddenly you think, wow, where have I been for the last 10 minutes? You were so deep into it. That is what builds children's ability to concentrate. And then they can learn, they can grow, they can start doing lessons, they can do lots of other things. But the first goal is concentration.
Yeah, I want to kind of go back into that, really helping parents set themselves up in those first few years around observing the child, right? So we're observing our children and we're seeing what are they gravitating towards. And like you said, going way back to let's have the environment set up for them to cultivate their interest and creativity. So having very interesting things in the home. Like for us, we have a lot of houseplants. Bless my husband, he takes on the care of all of them. It's
Wow.
amazing. And we have a lot. So way more than your average person, more than anyone I know. Anyways, that being said, houseplants are a huge part of the culture of our home, tending to them, taking care of them, having them around, giving them love. And my daughter went through this phase of they want to explore the houseplants. Oh, they have different leaf structures. Oh, they have different
Yes.
colors. Oh, like this one's this size, this one's this size. So you can so much in your own environment set them up to be that absorbent mind and really observe the differences. Okay, you have different rocks around, like we have a lot of rocks and crystals. Oh, the different size, the different texture, all of that. And she's constantly drawn to everything we have in our home, to the art, right? To all sorts of musical instruments, all sorts of access to lots of books. Because like you said, when you start going through books are so rich because they can take you to places that you're not, right? They can take you into different cultures and around the
Right.
world, or different creative
Totally.
thinking about fairies
Exactly.
and gnomes and whatever. Like it opens up the mind and the dialogue to just talk about the
Yes.
images. So not just reading the book, right? Like not just going through and reading, because for us it changes. Sometimes my daughter wants to talk a lot about the page, and sometimes she wants to really hear the words. And so we I have to really observe, what is she needing? What does she want? And like you said, the number one thing is your presence. And I think people in the modern day are so busy minded.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
I need to do the laundry. I need to do the dishes. I need to do this thing. And they're not being totally present, because you can incorporate your children into the laundry, into the dishes. Like I have, the step ladder for my daughter in the kitchen where she can come help, and she cooks eggs. Like she's under 2. She's 22 months now, but
That's
she started
awesome.
cooking eggs like a couple months ago. Like she knows when things are hot because we give her access to like so many places in our environment. And so she's able to really observe these practical life skills you talked about, which are like those first few years. They want to know how to do things. And you
They
have an
do.
amazing chart in your book, an amazing table that has, I think you go all the way to age 24, right? And they're in the
Yes.
6 year chunks. And there's these four,
Planes of development.
yes, planes of development. And that first one image that you have in the four planes of development is that first 0 to 6 years. And it says absorbent mind, show me how to do. And I found myself really, that works so well. And this is why I feel like my daughter's a genius. I literally do feel like she's a genius. And I feel like all children are born with that genius, and it just really needs to be cultivated. And so many parents just don't know how to do that, how to really like take that time. And it's okay if the dishes are going to take you way longer because you incorporated your child. Or it's okay if I'm folding laundry and she's unfolding it, I'm showing her and she's unfolding some and I'm getting some done. But when you incorporate them into these practical life skills and setting up their environment for success, to see what they're gravitating towards and see what they're interested in, I'm stunned by the genius of humanity and a human brain and the potential of children, and like all beings have that potential. And of course, it looks different because in the modern day, we're seeing a rise in autism. Like that's a serious issue right now, right? Especially among
Right.
boys. It's 1 in 32 as a national average. And then the average for boys is like 1 in 12. It's pretty wild. And
Gosh.
California has a really bad statistic and ratio. And so
Yeah.
much of that, I believe, is from our toxic environment, right? We are
Mhm.
overloaded in toxins in our food, in the air, in, everything that's going on in the water. And so this is causing, an influx in some challenges when it comes to maybe there's some intellectual disability or exceptionality, I prefer to call it. So those would be the only, differences, but the genius is still cultivated amongst those different groupings in their own way. But like we're talking about, just having that environment really set up for
Right.
children. And like you
Right.
said, the small furniture for them to maybe sit and put their shoes on or their socks on, or, finding in that independence, like Sequoia, my daughter, she can do so much for herself. And that's what I've just been mind blown in these first couple years is like, she's cultivating this independence, but it's a very dependent independence. She's very dependent on me to show her how to be, and I have that healthy attachment where my husband and we have a designated present parent. Your job is to be present
Wow.
with your
Oh my
child
gosh,
at
that's
all times
amazing.
for that time. And we trade off. And if for us, we only have one daughter, so we can do that, right? So I'm the present parent at home because I work part-time. And so I'm with her the majority of the time. And so I'm present with her all day. Then daddy gets home and daddy's the present parent. And it's not that I'm not still parenting and around, but I'm like cooking and cleaning and whatever she's wanting to do. Does she want to go outside, play in the garden, play with her dogs? Does she want to help in the kitchen? She just is doing whatever her thing. But all that to say, we have one parent that their job is just to observe and incorporate and be kind of in charge of, while the other parent can get some other things done, or it could free us up to like exercise or take a moment for ourselves or whatever we need to do. But we trade off. And then on the days that I go to work and we have a nanny at home, which I think is very important. If you can do so and you have the ability to figure out if you have to go back to work as a young mother or as a parent, and you can't be, there full time for your child. Maybe you want to be. And some people just, we can't financially afford that at this time because of everything going on, monetarily speaking and economically speaking. But there's so many mothers who want to be with their children, but they also have to provide for their family monetarily to maintain their lifestyle or maintain their living. And so how can you set your child up to have a healthy attachment when you're not there, and someone who can be super present with them? And what I just think, if you can figure out how to do a nanny or a nanny share when you're gone or have family, that's the most ideal situation for children. But anyways, she has her nanny who's her present person.
Someone who can really bond with her, right? And who can become a part of her life. It's
Exactly.
awesome.
It's her, their family, our care
Right.
team is family. And I know that you care
Yes.
so lovingly to your grandchildren, especially helping out, one of my besties. And she has triplets and there's so much there. And you so support that. And you're so there for them. And
I love it.
oh, I'm sure it's just the best and just blowing your mind to just watching your grandchildren develop and have already raised 6 children of your own and watching them. What a gift that is to be able to do that. But
Yes. That's what you were talking about. You're setting your daughter up for success in my mind and your family by creating routines and helping children understand the structure of life. And to me, I think that's what touches me most deeply about Montessori is that it's almost like a scientific formula. You look at nature, you look at the leaves and the trees, and there's seasons, right? And there's incredible geometry and symmetry in one leaf as it comes out, or in a zinnia. You see that nature has cycles and there's routines. And to me, I've been kind of learning about how to make my life more organized in my thinking, in my physical world. I think I've struggled a little bit with that. I tend to be more creative than organized, but I realize the more scientific I get just in thinking, doesn't have to be a really heady mental thing, but just thinking, okay, how can I help my daughter understand our life, our schedule? That I'm home on the weekends, but we have these people helping. I think that's so wonderful that you have broken it down, Amber, to that kind of scientific understanding in your home. And, just in a light way, it's beautiful. One of Montessori's principles is the triangle of relationships. And she talks about how there is the 3 points of the triangle. The top is the child's absorbent mind. And we're talking here 0 to 6, but all children incredibly have this connection with their families. But so the child is the first point. The second point is the parent or the adult. And the third point is the environment. And in her world, all of those points were very important for the development of the child. The child is dependent on the parent, as you so carefully pointed out, Amber, because they can't do everything. They're totally helpless at birth. And they depend on us to show them, to be present with them, to be intuitive with them, to hear their needs and help them understand how to do things. And we need the child because the child draws from us that incredible love and creativity and nurture. We can't help, and they're so adorable and cute that we just can't resist it, right? It just kind of draws from us the desire to know what we need to know so we can do for them the best things. And so it's the child and the parent. And then the third point of the triangle is the environment. And Montessori said, if things are not going well in your family or with your child, step back and look at the environment. Is the environment in order or is it really chaotic? Do you have a place for things? And this was one of the biggest struggles for me because I learned more of the Montessori environment when I already had 3 going on 4 children. And I had not taught my younger ones and my older ones how to put things away. So, and how to clean and help me and learn themselves so that they could be happy. But anyway, so keeping the environment is orderly is first of all, and then having little shelves, which I talk about later, little shelves that are for their learning. It could be one shelf with, 3 or 4 tiers, and you may have one shelf for practical life where they're doing those little hands-on exercises. You could have one shelf for reading cards, one shelf for little beans that you count, one shelf for sensorial activities, and one shelf for arts and crafts and music or whatever. Or it could be a whole room. It could be a big shelf for each one of those areas. And the lovely thing is that it's really just a concept, and parents can take that and develop it however they want. But I've just found that if I have even one little corner in my house that's just for my children or my grandchildren, and I have child-sized furniture with little chairs and little tables, maybe little relaxing couches, bookshelves for them, and shelves where they can help themselves to activities, take them off the shelf, take them to the table, do the fun things with painting or Play-Doh or whatever it is, and then help them learn to clean it up and put it back on the shelf, which is often a neglected part because we're all so busy, and it's totally understandable. But I find that children who learn to put things back feel really good about that. And they learn to push their chair in. They learn that, yes, this is my environment. I can help keep it clean and beautiful. I have a story I'd like to tell, Amber, that is about my daughter Rosie's son, Cruz, one of her triplets. Last Christmas, they were about 18 months old, these three identical boys. And someone gave Rosie a big, beautiful felt Christmas tree. And she put it on the wall, and there were felt ornaments that went on this tree. And all of her children, including her older daughter, Luna, loved it. And they would take all the ornaments off, and then they would rearrange them and put them on. And they were colorful and glittery and so beautiful. Well, one time I came over, and all the ornaments were all over the floor. And Cruz observed, I believe, from how we had set up the environment for them, that when there was an activity that had small parts, we had a little bowl or a box that held the small parts. And he realized with his Christmas tree that there was no box or bowl for all the small parts. So he, at 18 months, took it on himself to find a box, believe it or not. He brought it over and put it under this little felt Christmas tree hanging on the wall, and he gathered all the ornaments and put them in the box. I was totally blown away. I just thought, this just proves, the scientific theory that children learn by an orderly environment, and they learn the order of the universe by how we interact with them, how things occur. And he had intuited the unwritten rule that we had, and believe it, it's not perfect, but we do our best, that most activities have a little container for those small parts. And I just thought that was just amazing. And I believe that after knowing Montessori and being involved in Montessori for so long, and feeling the healing that has gone on my own being by ordering my own environment, that I believe it's part of the scientific mind. I think that categorizing things, okay, all the balls go in this bin, all the dolls go in this bin, the birds go in that bin, whatever it is, that orderly ability to categorize and sort, I believe, is the basis of the scientific mind. And we're not sitting them down and having them work on workbooks, which are fine for older kids, and my kids have loved workbooks, but it's like earlier than that. These boys were not even 2 yet. And like you talk about your daughter who can make eggs and probably knows where the utensils are in the kitchen. And, it's just amazing what we can impart to our children in those earliest years.
For us, everything has a place, everything has a home. And you're right, like different baskets and bins have the specific thing that goes in there. And we try to keep, we keep it all orderly. Everything has a home. And
So awesome.
And things are rotating, right? So I think
Right,
something that
yes.
parents do that isn't aligned to create an orderly environment is they have too many toys and too many things, and it's pretty chaotic for kids. So the more toys, the more chaos in the brain, the more that they are having to figure out, oh, how does this work? What does this do? What is it? So even if you want to have these different toys for your kids, putting them on a rotating schedule, putting them away somewhere, bringing them out, switching them around, and really matching their development. What are they working on? Like when you look at the science of child development, you go, oh, right now, this aspect is a huge deal. Like, oh, this fine motor skill, putting, maybe like picking up really small pieces, the pincher, even as really wee babies, they're little, developing their pincher graphs and giving them activities where they can cultivate that. So, blending the science with what you're observing and rotating what's available for them, and not having too much and keeping it in order, having everything go back to its home place. And, Sequoia is so good at keeping things tidy because we have shown her, even like her hands with eating. She uses her napkin, puts it to the side, wipes her face, she knows where things go. That goes there. And she's always helping put things back, put them back away. And sometimes she loves to dump things out. All children, they want to dump, they want to explore.
Right.
It can be a mess and the chaos can occur, but then to reset everything and teach them, help mama, this goes in here. Let's put these away. And since she's been so we've always been like, oh, help mama, help dada, and do X, Y, and Z. And she just rises to the occasion and does the things. And it's so impressive. So yeah, just teaching them order and teaching them we clean up this when we make a mess, or when this happens, we've got to do that. It teaches them that cause and effect relationship, and also so many other things. But yeah, it keeps our environment in order, and it keeps their brains in order, not crowded with chaos. And so I think it's really important that parents, to keep their environment in order, they limit what is around and really getting rid of the extra clutter that doesn't need to exist in the space, that isn't functioning for the space or has any purpose, right?
Totally. I think decluttering is kind of an ongoing situation in our culture. We have so much stuff now, and identifying what's really valuable. You're so right, Amber, is so key. And in my book, I really talk about that, creating a structure, shelves in your garage or someplace where you can have bins for different categories, maybe, so you can have a place to put things away and then get rid of things that you really don't need. My son and daughter-in-law are about to have their third child, and we've been helping them, and they've been decluttering everything just so they can be really present, because I think too much stuff distracts us as well. And so it's harder to be present when there's so much around. And so that's huge. That's so huge.
Absolutely. So thanks for sharing that. That's important for listeners to hear.
Yes. And I think the other thing, I wanted to go back to the absorbent mind a little bit. First of all, we know that our children's brains and our brains have many different areas, right? We have music side, language, math, etc. And the more experiences we give our children, the more all those different areas of their brains develop. So it's really important to, especially in the first 6 years, to give our children as many different kinds of experiences as we can. Now, I'm also a proponent of the multiple intelligences idea that Howard Gardner discovered. And I have on my website, montessorifamilies.com, a free assessment you can use for your children if you want. But it helps you identify what their gifts are, what their talents and their strengths. And I think if we understand what their interests are, like Amber, you've been talking about, I think that we can kind of focus a lot of what we do to help them build those strengths for confidence, for the gift that they've been given to bring into this world. I believe everybody has a purpose and something wonderful that they've been meant to bring. And I think that that helps them. So anyway, all those different areas of the brain, giving them lots of different experiences, helps them know what's out there and helps them develop. So the absorbent mind, according to Montessori, goes from 0 to 6 or 7, depending on the child. And they say that Einstein lived in his right brain, the creative brain, until he was 9. And he didn't do well in a regular school because of that, because he was so much in his ideas and, his mind was just way out there. But he brought amazing gifts to the world. And he then learned to work with the more linear side so he could do the math and write them down and all of that. So the Montessori's concept of the absorbent mind goes like this. So from 0 to 3, children are in the unconscious absorbent mind. They just absorb. They have no filter. They don't think, oh, I would like to learn about this, but I don't want to learn about that. They just absorb everything. And from 3 till about 6 or 7, they're starting to move into the more linear left side of the brain. And they are able to filter a little bit. They can choose, well, I want to work on this, but I don't really care to work on that. Or, they make choices more. And yes, toddlers make choices of their work, but they still just absorb everything in their environment. They're ultra sensitive, as Amber mentioned. And the older children have more of a self-guided presence.
I think I want to talk about that, Teresa, in regard to the 4 planes of development. So you've got that table in your book, and the first plane, like you said, is that infancy, so toddler and primary age, 0 to 6. And in your book, you've got this physical independence section. And like we talked about, it's teach me to do it myself. And so they're wanting to learn in their environment from themselves. And the characteristics you have: movement, language, order, which we discussed, and our role, prepared environment, which is everything we just talked about. So now kind of going into that second plane is childhood. So from 0 to 12 about, and I think that's an important comment that you made, is it's an about, it's not perfect for every child. It doesn't happen right at their 6th birthday,
Yes,
as we all know, right? Development is like,
exactly.
there's this like spectrum of it. And so we're all developing a little bit different, and everybody's an individual being. And so abouts, right? So
Yes.
this matches the child development and everything like that, and matches the neurology of the brain, because around 6 or 7, the brain starts to shift, which matches with that's why I got so excited, Teresa, about the 4 planes of development in your book and that graphic, that the table, because this is very much matching what I know about child development psychologically and neurologically, that these shifts happen. So in that second plane, you've got childhood. So that's lower and upper elementary aged children from 6 to 12. And in the planes of development, it's kind of approximating every 3 years: 6 to 9, 9
Yes.
to 12. And so it's these perfect triangles in each section. So in the physical independence portion, it says, teach me to think for myself. And so it's got the characteristics are abstract thinking, imagination, socialization, and our role, it says, is cosmic education, which really in your book, you talk about that being that the cultural studies and the other aspects, like you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation too. So let's go more into that second plane of development.
Well, I think once that absorbent mind, the right brain, starts to integrate with the left brain, now children have, just fresh from that absorbent mind, they have all these beautiful impressions, wonderful ideas. And now they're learning to use the left brain. They're learning to read and write and be more technical with all of that. They're also becoming more and more social, and they like to work with groups. So they enjoy being with friends and working on projects. And I know in Montessori environments that I've worked in the past, that's what children love to do when they get into that second plane. They're very community oriented. So it's also a time when children love to help other groups because they're aware of the community aspect of life, that people can't survive without each other. None of us can live totally alone, and that we can help each other. And I think it's very powerful for them also to realize, even as a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old, that they can benefit other people is really powerful. And I think also, again, the idea of helping them explore their gifts, helping them you don't want to be narrow down, well, I'm going to be a singer only, but you want to give them lots of experiences in that musical area if that's really where you see them leaning, as well as giving them all the other kinds of experiences. But as they develop their gifts, they will have more confidence. I think they will have more fulfillment in life because they'll feel like they're really impacting. So
How could parents set up the environment for this time? I think that would be really helpful for listeners to hear who have children between that 6, 7 and that 11, 12, which is that at the end of this second phase is the beginnings of puberty. So, our brain, our pituitary gland is signaling to the body, hey, it's time to change, and body, mind, spirit. And these are the kids that I work with. So I love hearing about the second plane. But how could parents really help who have children that age, really help cultivate this Montessori type environment that's really nurturing them and really bringing out their gifts?
thank you so much for asking that. And I want to take a step back and just say, when we're looking at the 4 planes from 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, 18 to 24, we notice that the first 6 years is not real intellectual. It's more experiential and sensorial. And then the next plane, the 6 to 12-year-olds, are really diving into the more mental, they're more thinking, they learn to use their hands and write and read and speak and work in groups. And then the time of puberty from 12 to 18, as we can all probably attest to, the youth gravitate again to a more of a sensorial or almost emotional plane. And Montessori actually suggests for the children during puberty that they not be so academic, that they not have to sit for hours and hours doing academic work, and instead that they work with their hands and that they grow vegetables, sell them, and then use the money to create accounting skills and math skills related to the growing of vegetables and all of that. But coming back to the 6 to 12, this is the time where children really learn to use their brains and their minds and can get excited about all of those academic things. And not that alone. To answer your question, I think to have, again, areas where you have observed your children are developmentally, again, to have furniture at their level, to have tables and desks. Tables are nice with extra chairs so they can work in groups, whether with friends or siblings or whatever, having community areas where they can sit and have coffee tables and bookshelves their size, and again having lots of books, and again books that rotate, because you may not have enough room for all the books that your child might want, or if you have multiple children and that change with the seasons or with their seasons of life. I think there are 4 areas of children that I always go back to. There's the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And we want to have areas and activities that nurture all those aspects. So if you're homeschooling or you're schooling after school and you want to have Montessori materials, there's a whole curriculum you can look at to create those hands-on Montessori materials in science, in language, in math, etc. But even if you're not doing that specifically, you can still have little science experiments. I know my daughter-in-law did a science experiment with Allie and Jack, their children, the other day, where they went outside and they gathered snow and they brought it in, they put it in a bowl, and they wondered what would happen if they put salt on it, because a lot of people talk about putting salt on their steps. And so they put salt on the snow and it all melted. It was such a perfect scientific experiment because they were curious. Helping your children master their level of physical independence. Okay, if it's snowing, are you learning to use the snow shovel? Are you learning to sweep the kitchen floor, do dishes? Again, you're looking at their 4 planes. What are the mathematical things? What are the intellectual things? The reading, the speaking, having little Toastmaster groups, maybe with your friends, or having book clubs for children of that age group, where you get together with people and you choose a book to read and you all read it together, the children with the parents or the parents with the children. Again, depending on their developmental level, if they're reading independently, they could read it out loud to the family or read to you. Or maybe you're going back and forth. They read a page and you read a page because they're just moving into reading. And then, so we have the 4 levels again: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Maybe they have a corner where they have things that represent their spiritual faith, whether it's a religion or it's a way of life. Maybe it's relating to nature. Maybe it's a candle, a vase that has a place to put flowers or nature objects, to just go and be quiet, to go and sit and look out a window at the sunset, maybe that aims at the south, where you can appreciate the beautiful sunset together. And maybe you sit and you have a ritual where you sit for a minute and you just look at the sunset and reflect on how beautiful it is. Emotional, again, for me would be the community area and learning to communicate in compassionate ways, learning that to express, these are my needs, these are my feelings, this is what I would like to ask of you, this is what I would like to ask of myself, and this is my hope. This is my image of what we can accomplish together. If they're at the table with their siblings and things don't seem to be going well, or maybe somebody always grabs the biggest bowl of delicious food, the child could have a system that helps them express that. When I come to the table, I'm really hungry too. I really need to eat too. And I would like to, and I feel sad that you always grab that bowl, and I'm so hungry. I need to know that when I come to the table, that some of that delicious food will be saved for me. And so what I'd like to propose is that we all take small helpings at the beginning and we pass the bowls to everyone. And I'm wondering how you feel about this, but somehow having systems in our homes so that at that developmental level, they can learn to express themselves and master those 4 areas.
Yeah, I want to go into that because in your book, and this is something that clicked for me too, because I have this in my classroom, is the peace table.
Peace table is what I was talking about. Yes.
And so you were talking about, you were giving an example of a conversation that would happen at a peace table.
Yes.
And you really modeled it obviously well, very high emotional intelligence. So really starting with the I feel, right? Not putting it on the other person and that blame and that shame, but just
Right.
modeling those being emotionally, bringing that awareness and having that grace too of not like that irritation. Hey, when I came to the table, there was no food. You're modeling like
Right.
so a peace table conversation, and it might not look perfect in the momentary time,
Right.
but your family could come back to it. So having a space in your home where your family can come and talk about things, especially in that stage where they are in that second plane of development, and teaching them how to be more emotionally aware and attuned, and listening, and having the structure of, okay, you have a talking piece of some sort, and then you're saying a feeling, I felt blank, with a example of a factual thing that happened, not like, something that you're inferring somebody was, but like a real example. And then putting it back with the curiosity at the end. I love that. And so I think too, like what we could have as a family is that structure of, here we are sitting at the table, and maybe some talking stems, because in my classroom, my students, I have to show them, we have to model through different scenarios. So we'll pretend that different things happened, and things that, like, common things that might happen at school, and how we can approach that situation, and really use that, that languaging of, I felt blank when this happened, and posing that question at the end. And then the other person, you have I'm hearing you say that blank. And it really helps us as an adult. Like when we start working with children at this capacity and going into this, these emotional conversations, it has really drastically helped me in my life be able to speak when difficult things happen, in relating to, people in my family, like maybe my husband, having us have a conversation where we're coming back to peace, but like modeling that with our children, and having them watch, when you are making a
Yes.
repair, like that repair
Exactly.
work. And so I love that, a part of this Montessori method you could have in the home during this phase is like, you have these more structured ways that you can talk about difficult situations. There are so many families, and mine included, when I was younger, where it's like we didn't really have those family meetings where we talked about the issues coming up. But it is so important to cultivate, our emotional awareness and our capacities. And we got to teach it from a really young age. And this is what I appreciate too about this. In Washington State, we've adopted a social emotional learning standards. And this happened maybe, I don't remember, maybe 4 years ago, but it happened during my career. And I got my master's, and I studied social emotional learning in my master's
Mhm.
program. And my thesis was all on garden-based learning. What were the implications of school gardens, and how does that impact, a child? And so that work was really fascinating, and I feel like really blends and leads into this Montessori work. But
So wonderful. Can I say one
yeah,
thing too?
yes.
That's so awesome, Amber. And I I actually did almost the exact same thing in my master's degree. That's
Oh,
amazing.
oh, I love that. Yeah,
I
it
led
was
a
really
school garden.
fascinating, right?
Yes.
And so I categorized, all this research, as you know,
Yeah.
how much research
Wow.
it
So
takes. And
wonderful.
yeah, it was really fascinating, has an open mind in huge ways, but to really help, this environment be set up for success. So I love the
Yes.
peace table idea in your book and having that with your family and setting that up.
And I think having a written flow helps people,
It
you
helps
know,
children. I
it
mean, that's
helps everyone. Yes.
yeah, adults included. And
Right.
and then it's hard because I think people are like, oh, does it have to be so structured and rigid? But it actually having these sentence stems that there's a lot of science around that. Having steps, and in my classroom, we have something called the tree of choices. And it starts out with the roots. I felt blank because blank. And it's like very where they can pull from and go, okay, I'm at the second step. Oh, in the second step, I got to make this choice, or I've got to say this
No,
piece.
that's
And
awesome.
yeah, so having a visual for your children, especially in
Right.
that time, that really helps them. And it also really helps us because so many people in these older generations, we didn't get that, right? That wasn't a thing when I was in school. There was not a lot of cultivating of that social emotional intelligence. And now there's more of that effort behind it because we're noticing, so many adults suffering from just depression, anxiety, etc., whatever other mental, thing is coming up. And that's a lot, right? It's such a there's a lot of things stemming from that with a lot of issues in our culture. But when I think back to it, like preventative care is this educational period for our children, is working with children and really helping them have this environment that's going to help them develop in the highest way. And these methods, this methodology really supports that. So it's preventative work where our children highest prayers aren't suffering at such a crippling level with mental dis-ease.
I agree with you. And I think having something on the wall or someplace you can take out, like you said, it's just helpful. And it could even be pictures. It doesn't have to be words. Just feel what am I feeling? Or a symbol that would reflect that. What am I feeling? What am I needing? What am I asking? And how do you feel about this? Or how can we move forward? And then on the other side, maybe I'm concerned about someone else, or maybe one of my children is concerned about someone else. They could reverse that. What are you feeling? What are you needing? What do you want from this situation? And we can learn to interact with other people and help other people feel and kind of connect with what they need. Because if we don't let people know what we need, we can't expect that they will always know, right? And that's something I learned. So you're right. Helping our children learn to communicate and understand themselves is so huge. Montessori talked a lot about nature, as you have, Amber, and you're talking about all those beautiful plants in your household and understanding how to care for them. And I can just imagine what Sacagawea is going to come away with from this, understanding the roots and the leaves and the trunk of the trees and all of that, how she's going to develop. And Montessori encouraged us to give children at least 2 hours of outside time a day, which is a lot. And I have found from studying that and interacting with children that has helped me
Oh, yes. Oh my
even,
gosh.
you
I
know,
think it's so vital for a parent. Like parenthood is so much, especially early parenthood and especially early motherhood. Like, let's be real. It's
yeah,
so much on the mother, especially a breastfeeding mother, but rightly so, developmentally so, neurologically so. It's so much in parenthood. And yeah, going outside really. So for the first 14
ease.
months of my children,
Hmm.
for the first 14 months of my daughter's life, I was the primary caretaker. I didn't work. I took work off and I needed to break up my time outside to bring that peace and to bring that ease and to switch up the situation, especially, an early newborn. They're coming into themselves. There's so much going on in their brain. And sometimes it's like, ooh, they might be having a hard time. And you're trying to meet their needs of like, okay, they're fed, they're changed. What is it? Sometimes just changing the environment does wonders. And yeah, so from a wee age, and that really supported me as a mother, connecting with nature and taking my time. We would go on like 3 walks a day at a point. I'd
That's
just be out
awesome.
there all the time. And then, she
Yes.
got to the stage of crawling. Well, she's crawling around the dewy grass, and we're out there on a blanket and we're spending our time. And we go outside every day. It's a huge part
So
of
awesome.
our lifestyle. And we're really blessed. Where we live on 3 acres, and we have a path to the beach, and we have a beach we can just go to every day, and like really a great safe neighborhood to walk around in and explore. And so there's a lot in our own yard, and then a lot so close to where we live that we're just
Amazing.
exploring the plants and the animals and everything. And we've got chickens and gardens, and it I can see what it's doing for her. I can
Yeah,
see what it does for children. And even if you don't live in that situation, how can you walk around your neighborhood, notice the different
exactly.
plants growing in the neighborhood, go to the local park? There are things we
Exactly.
can access if we don't even live right in it, but there are things we can do on the daily with our children. And like you said, it hugely helps us too, and hugely benefits them in so many more ways than we could even talk about.
Yes, absolutely. And you're so right. Even if you live in the middle of a city, which I grew up in the middle of a city, and I love to walk in my city. I love to look at the houses and walk for blocks and, just look at all kinds of things. And like you said, I was able to find little sanctuaries of trees and parks. And there was a college up in the hills that I used to love to go to when I was started driving, and I would drive up there. It was probably 10 minutes away, but I would go up there just to walk around in the Oakland Hills, and I could feel what they talked about. I think it's in Korea, they talk about forest bathing and going near
Japan.
trees. Oh, Japan, yes. Because and you can correct me if you know more, Amber, but supposedly trees emit phytochemicals that help our immune system and heal
Mm-hmm.
people. So
Mm-hmm.
wherever you can find a tree, if a tree grows in Brooklyn, go outside and find a little tree. It's an element of healing that I think our world is just starting to understand. It's so exciting.
Yeah, it is an exciting time. And I think that's the going into my background in public education is there's not enough time outside. They have
Yes.
a very limited recess schedule. And even their recess, it's like they're playing on these blacktop, environment with these toys, these plastic toys. And I'm like, what if this was like a big forest with trees, and it also had things, safe places to climb, and it was really integrated with the natural world? That would be so much more beneficial for children in public school institutions if we just even changed that
Oh.
model. Some of the environments feel very prison like,
Mhm.
where they're inside all day, they're stuck in these. And even if it's like a beautiful, amazing classroom, like our classroom has such good vibes and a good feel. But I will say we're so limited on our time outside. And if we had more of that environment where there were more learning spaces for them outside instead of a glyphosate sprayed field and a black top,
Oh, right.
if they had more safer places to learn, like one of the first schools I worked at, it had just an incredible school garden, a great learning space, benches all around. You could take your kids out there. You got clipboards, and you're doing all sorts of, you're integrating science and math and art and everything. And that's what we can do at home too in these methods and in our
Absolutely.
home gardens. But like
Yes.
having those spaces for kids, and that was epic. But at the school I work at now, there were like falling apart like garden boxes in a really bad spot. And then I wrote a grant through Delta Airlines, and it got us some
Wow.
garden boxes. But even so, the garden boxes were really measly. They weren't really nice. It wasn't this like really epic school garden like the first school I worked at, and even the school I interned in Bellingham. but I've worked at a few different schools. And so I can see the differences in like those learning environments and the outside spaces where some schools are like maybe butted up to a nature preserve. You could walk there. And then some schools don't have that access. They're in the middle of a city and it's not very like, the outside isn't a huge part of the culture. But if it were in public institutions, that would make huge changes. And even if it was in cityscapes where you could change the playground into modeling and mimicking more of what the natural world would look like if it was uninterrupted by humans that live there now, right? It had the native trees and the native plants and big, beautiful gardens where kids were all putting their time and their energy, like they're learning so much about their world and their food and their bodies. Like school gardens integrate
Exactly.
everything. It's so, and so home gardens, if you're at home with your children and say, even if they go
Yes.
to public schools, when they come home, okay, that's
Mm.
the homework is to go outside.
Yes.
And the homework is to be yeah, with your family and spend time in the natural world is if you're in that school
So
environment.
grounding, so
Mhm.
grounding and peaceful. And well, Amber, it's people like you who are going to help our system change. Here you are getting the word out there with your podcast and your own experience and your knowledge. It's really, I think, hopeful for us to think of what the future might hold for all of our different kinds of schools and our homes. And thank you for mentioning the garden at home. The garden can be almost a central piece of your home learning environment, regardless of whether your children are in school or at home. But that it's so, so important.
Yeah, like where can we meet the gaps if our children are going to the local public school and maybe they want to, because a lot of children do also really love school, but making sure we're setting up that environment that's really nurturing their gifts and exposing them to the world like the Montessori way. Yeah, doing that work at home. And at this time, too, and we've talked about this outside of this podcast, but how this is a time where parents are really trying to figure out a new way to educate their children. They are looking for different models because our current model has not served us in the best way. It's really just America school systems have just kind of pumped out a worker bee force and it's not really going to the root of what is important in our well-being spiritually, emotionally, physically, all the things. Like there's so much toxicity within it and so much beauty. I see both sides, right? I see so much of it. But yeah, these parents are really looking for a different way now with their children. And especially if they can, like if the parents are at home, maybe they want to serve them in those early years at home and then take them to homeschooled groups, or there's people are looking for a different way. They don't want their children just inside all day in a public school, forced to take these state tests that tell them that do what? Like what is the oversight of some of this stuff and what it does to children? Oh, because I don't fit in the box and I don't know the standard at this particular time at this particular age and I'm not meeting these, then I'm not intelligent. Like people are like, they feel like inadequate. They feel like they're failing. So we see children thrive in it, but we also see that, of course, the flip side, more children not thriving in these environments. They need something else. And if parents can give it to them, right? If they can incorporate this Montessori method, they can afford to do so. They can create homeschool co-ops with other families where, oh, school is 5 days a week. Well, these two people are teaching on these days. These people are on these days, and everyone, the village is taking the role, and you're trading off. And you can make it very
Exactly.
affordable if you find what you're looking for.
Yes.
You can do whatever you want with your kids and for your kids.
That's
There are
right.
resources out there, no matter where you are on the spectrum. You can figure it out what works for you in your situation that's going to benefit these kids. But parents are seeing things not working out, and it's a failing. If so much of the system is failing our students and such a huge disservice. But that being said, there are a lot of also amazing programs, a lot of amazing work being done, my work included. I
Yes.
feel very proud of the work I've done with children, the
Me
impact I've had
too.
on children. And so, anyways, parents are seeking a different way. And if we can get more parents' voices out there to create change in these public school systems or in the culture, or make a different choice for their children that will really serve their children, and really like, oh, if your children loves, farming and they're gravitating towards that. Oh, there's farm forest programs, or if there's not a program near you or you can't afford it, how can you get that going in your child's school, in your child's public school? How can you advocate for a school garden, be involved, help fundraise money, help, whatever we want for our children, we can be a part of, but we can't just leave it up to the hands of the people currently in charge and the other people. We have to say what we want as parents and as community members and what we think is valuable for children. And then we make those changes because, yeah, there's so
Oh my
much
gosh.
politically, governmentally, everything like, uh,
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say that. I think that's the perfect culmination of our conversation, though, and I'm so grateful and so loving what you're saying. And I think as I'm listening to you, and even thinking of myself in the past, we did homeschool some, and I wished I had homeschooled a lot more. And I just want to encourage parents to realize that, the world is open to them right now. The world is open to you if you're listening to this. And I think courage is one of the biggest things that we need as parents, as grandparents, to find what will help our children. We need a dream. We need to really look at our children, our families, and not have this idealistic image that the public school or any school for that matter can meet all of our children's needs, and that they're so much better prepared, that the schools are better prepared than us, because I think that parents know their children best. We can find the resources we need. I mean, I know a family that homeschools their children. They have them in outdoor school for 1.5 to 2 days a week. They have them go to a Montessori school 1 day a week. Of course, it's a school that's flexible and willing to do that. And they co-op other days of the week and they teach different things. And I think when I started homeschooling and co-oping and had to take on certain topics, I was so scared. And I thought, how could I ever do this? But I learned how to do it. And it became so fun, so joyous. And I think also one of the points I didn't make earlier about the challenges of parents today is that we don't tend to have the same villages that earlier generations had. We don't have all of our extended family right around us. And it can be lonely. It can be just hard to know what to do. But I think that parents and families gathering to educate their children create such strong community because your goals are for the same purpose. You all love your children so much. And if you get together with other parents who have skills, somebody can teach science and somebody can teach math and somebody can teach bread making. Somebody else can plant gardens and you can find a lot to build a garden in together. I mean, it's really endless. And I think that there is a new era coming. There's a new movement of parents who are really wanting to serve their children in the highest ways possible. And I think Montessori has a major role in that, just in the principles that she developed and the things that she shared. So thank you for saying all that, Amber. That was really, really wonderful.
Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, I absolutely believe in this method. And there's some cool things going on in certain, like even public schools. There are 2 Montessori elementary schools. There's 38 elementary schools in the district I teach in. And 2 of those schools, so not very many elementary schools, but at least 2 choices are public Montessori, going off of Montessori methods, which is amazing. And I haven't personally worked in that school, so I don't know what it's like and how closely it follows the Montessori way. I would assume it does, but there's so many different programs and so many different things we can do with our children. And no matter the situation, we could always supplement on the back end. We can figure it out. We could puzzle piece, we can do really so much more for our children. And if we all came together, that's really going to make the change. And there is a movement, there's a paradigm shift, there's a lot going on that we're noticing, like public schools starting to have less enrollment, especially in certain districts or places where parents are like, no, I want something else and I want to do something else. And I think for the parents, like you said, that don't know where to start. Okay, well, there you can do some, in the age of technology, you can do some research. There are different curriculums available. If you're like, I don't know what to do or how to start or how to work with children personally at this level, or I need some supplemental things. Well, there are things you can find out there. And then there's also your community members, your village members that you're bringing into it. And this is a call to action for all of us to come
Yes,
together and figure out
absolutely.
new ways and also change systems that are in place. I think people are starting to give up on the public school system because they're realizing, oh, it's not changing. It's hard to make a change. And even me being in it, it is really hard. Like, I came into this wanting to be a change maker. I was very intentional with my choice to be a public school teacher. And I have thus always been very intentional about it. I could easily go do something else, go work in a Montessori school, go work in a Waldorf school, go do something else with kids. But I'm like, I'm trying to get into that system. I'm trying to see that system for what
That's
it
so
is.
wonderful.
I'm trying to see what works for it, what doesn't, and like, where can we make a change? But it does feel helpless too when you're in it, because you're like, whoa, like that was my ambition as a young person. Then I got in it and I was like, whoa, how do I make a change outside of my own
So
four
huge.
walls of my classroom? It's like, whoa, there's so much going on. And again, a lot of beauty, a lot of really well-intentioned, well-hearted, amazing humans working for as best we can with what we have. But yeah, it's got to be our communities coming together and calling a collective shift, and
Yes.
knowing that it's just, we can't just put it on schools. We can't just put it on other people. We have to put it on ourselves.
And I think, Amber, just, the fact that you have been in the middle of all of that for so long, it's brought you to this point where you've created this podcast series so you can share. And hopefully many people will be stirred and moved by what you're saying. And I think this is really, really valuable, what you're sharing. And I believe people will rise to the occasion. We've talked about a lot in this podcast. We've talked about a lot of different concepts and words, and, you can try this and try that. And I just want to encourage everyone to, again, take a spiral notebook, sit down with yourself, take some coffee or tea or whatever you drink, and, just have time with yourself, and especially with your partner or spouse, and breathe. Realize that your presence is really going to be the most important thing for you and for your children, that you can just be present and think about, what do we want? What do we want for our children? And what will it take for us to get there? Sometimes there's sacrifices to be made. Sometimes people, will live in a smaller house or move or whatever it takes to accomplish their goals, whatever that is. But anyway, I've really enjoyed being able to share all this so much.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to have you on. And I have, just before we close, a couple last questions. And one of that being, I want to bring more attention to your book, The Montessori Home and Beyond. Such an incredible gift to the world. The subheading is Nurture the Heart of Your Child and Family. And I want to know, what do you hope parents feel or understand after reading The Montessori Home and Beyond?
Well, I hope that they feel supported, inspired, and empowered. I believe in parents. I believe you're the best bet for your children. And I hope that they will come away thinking, okay, if I'm reading this book, it's probably because I feel called to do something different with my family. And I hope and pray that you will realize that there are solutions to whatever issues you have or whatever dreams you have, that there are ways to accomplish them. And I think, first of all, coming away and identifying what it is you want. What is your dream for your family? And then how can you accomplish that dream? To me, that would be the most wonderful outcome from my book. Thanks for asking.
Thanks for sharing that. And may that be so. And where can listeners find your book, and how can they connect with you and your work?
Oh, thank you so much. My book is on Amazon and Ingram Spark. Again, it's The Montessori Home and Beyond, Nurture the Heart of Your Child and Family. And My Instagram is Nurturing Your Child's Heart, no apostrophe, Nurturing Your Child's Heart. And again, my name is Teresa Angeles. My website is Montessori Families, plural.com. And on there, I have a free assessment for helping parents identify their children's gifts. It's very simple. You just it's more of like not a survey, but it's just a question and answer thing. But I think I wish I had done more of that when my children were young, because it will help you to tune in more to what your children need and how you can provide those for them.
Amazing. And I will link all of that in the show notes so listeners can find your work. I could talk to you for hours and days. We could go into so many rabbit holes. It's been such a pleasure, Teresa, having you on here. And thank you for all the wisdom you are spreading and giving families and all the hope that you're instilling. I'm so inspired by what you're doing. I'm so inspired by who you are, your children, everything. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And likewise, I'm inspired by you, Amber. So grateful to be able to speak here.
Yes. Okay. Bye, Teresa.
Bye.
Thank you for walking this path of holistic wellness and mindful living with me. I hope today's discussion planted seeds in the hearts of those that need it most and has inspired you in some way. If you found value in our conversation, please consider subscribing to the Sacred Rite podcast and leaving a review. It really helps this podcast reach more listeners, and I would be so grateful. I would love to connect over social media. My Instagram handle is @sacred.rite. There you can stay up to date on upcoming episodes, current offerings, and small batch releases of our handmade botanical remedies. I will leave any relevant links from today's episode in the show notes. The music in this podcast is from an incredible musician and a dear sister of mine, Satori Key. Be sure to check out her music on all major platforms. Her medicine music is transformative and deeply healing and has truly changed my life. Tune in next time. Until then, nurture your body and soul, and remember, it's your sacred right.